everyone to Coffee with a Codex. My name is Dot Porter. I am a curator in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books and Manuscripts in the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. Coffee with a Codex is our weekly program where we take a book off the shelf and just do a little show and tell with you. It is very informal, and you know, as I go, please feel free to drop questions in the chat. I've just put some links in the chat, so if you want to look at the digital manuscript while I show this to you, you can follow that first link. And then there's links to upcoming programs and a few other things we have going on. If you want to join our mailing list, if you're not already on it, you can do that there. We are joined by Amy Hutchins. She is the manuscripts cataloger here at Penn. So I often look to her for help when she knows things that I don't know. But I'm really excited about this one today, which is shelfmark LJS 473. That's what we have here. LJS 473 is a 15th century Italian manuscript, Venetian specifically, so from Venice, and it is from specifically, so it's dated to 1464 and 1465, and we'll get into why we date it at that time. So if you've been here before, you know that the way that I operate is I'll sort of find a book that looks interesting, and then I'll put it on the schedule, and then I won't think about it again until sort of it's time to prepare, sometimes the morning of. So this morning I came in and I went down, and Amy very helpfully gave me an article that has been written about this manuscript, partially about this manuscript. And it actually includes a lot of information that isn't in the record yet, because sometimes this is what happens with cataloging. New finds, new things come up, and it might take a while for it to make it into the catalog, if it's even true. You know, there's still this bit of like, what's going on? So that was sort of exciting. If you look at the record, it will say that it is a unique copy of a text, unique meaning that it isn't otherwise, there aren't any other copies existing that we know of a text having to do with shipbuilding and navigation. And it looks like it's actually not unique, that there is, so it's been identified, and there's one other copy that exists. And that is pretty neat. It's by Benedetto Cotrugli, and it's called De Navigatione, composed in 1664 to 1665, which is interesting because that's when this manuscript is dated. There is a date that we can actually look at here. How do you know when a manuscript is specifically dated? Sometimes there is a date there, and if we zoom in, here, that is 1664. So that is the date. Now, this raises a question. Is this the original copy, or is this a copy of another manuscript? So it could be that this was the very first copy, and the other manuscript that we know of that has the same text maybe it was copied from this one. Maybe both of these were copied from some other copy. And does this date actually refer to this manuscript, or does this date refer to the manuscript that it was copied from? And I don't know, but these are interesting. These are sort of interesting questions to come up. So what is it? All right, so I already mentioned it is a treatise about shipbuilding and navigation. And if you, like me, saw the announcement that it was shipbuilding and you thought, oh, we're going to get to look at some pictures of ships. Well, no, I'm very sorry. There's maybe one illustration in here that is arguably a picture of a ship, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. But mostly it's actually about navigation. And there are a few illustrations in it, but they are sort of diagrams that you will see in other situations. So let's take a look. We'll start at the front. So here's the preface, the start of the preface. We have a very nice illuminated border and an initial here. And the preface is just the first few pages. And what we have out in the margin are references to classical, both Greek and Latin philosophers and other thinkers that the author is quoting in this. So he's sort of situating his text, although he's writing in the 15th century, he is situating his text within this sort of larger world. Because of course there was a lot of geography that was written about, early on. Humans have always had an interest in sort of the lay of the world and their place in it, and connecting with each other. And so he's sort of setting his text up within that. So some of the names are actually written out here in the margins. Other ones I just sort of saw as we were going through. So this is the end of the preface. And then the first section of text, I have about 3 different things open. Let me see if I can find this. Oops. The first chapter is Descriptio Totius Orbis, or the description of the whole world. So in this first section, he's like, I'm gonna tell you about the world. Now you're gonna notice that there is a big blank space here. And that's because this has been patched with paper. So this is a paper, this is another thing that is interesting to me about this manuscript, is that some of the leaves are paper and some of the leaves are parchment. And this happens to be a paper leaf, and it has been patched with a great big paper patch. And you'll note that this is the start of a section. And so I'm guessing that there at one point was an illuminated initial, similar probably to this one here. And because it was on paper, it was easy to rip out. Parchment doesn't rip easily. Parchment, you shouldn't, don't ever do this, but you can cut, you can cut parchment. Paper, you can just rip. I think somebody ripped it out because they wanted it. And so it's been patched up with this paper patch here. And again, we have more references to here we have Diogenes and Plato and Socrates here. So he's sort of setting himself up again in this context, but also saying, here's what I know. I'm a very smart guy, and you should listen to me, what I have to say. So here, back to the issue of the paper and parchment, we're in the middle of the choir here. So choirs, as you may remember, the way that books are made in this period is you have sheets of writing material that are then folded into little booklets that we call choirs, and then they're sewn together, and you sew many of these together and it makes a book. And so when you're in the middle of a choir, you will have sewing. You can see the thread right there. There's the thread down the middle. And this bifolia, so this is a single sheet, and this is parchment, which is made of animal skin. And it's quite strong. As I said, it's hard to, you have to cut it. It's hard to rip. And then the rest of the choir is paper, except for the very first what we call the outer bifolia. That is the bifolia that's on the outside that becomes the first and the last pages. And this is something that you actually see. I have seen this before. So here's folio 10 is the last one. So we call this a quire of 10, made of 5 sheets folded together. And the outer and the inner are made of parchment. This is a way to make your book stronger if you can't make it all out of parchment. You can make the inner and outer folios out of parchment, and the inside is paper, and it's less likely to rip apart because you've got that going on. Again, it's not something you see a whole lot, but I'm sure Amy has seen this before. I've seen this before, so it's pretty neat. Okay, so we're in the second section, which is a description of the whole Earth. And here's where we get our first illustration, or really it's a diagram. But again, it's not a ship. This is again, I say it's a diagram that you see. I'm just looking to see what exactly we call it. It's the zones of the Earth. And I'll turn it, usually you see it the other way. It's turned sideways for some reason. So I'm going to turn it this way so we can see it. Usually when I've seen it, it's like this. So what's going on? So this is to show the parts of the Earth, a diagram of the parts of the Earth that are good for living in. There's a term for it that I'm sort of blanking on. So the top and the bottom are frigid. So they're cold, right? Because the Arctic and the Antarctic, they're very cold, so they're frigid. The very middle is the torrid zone. Torrid zone, it's very hot, right around the equator. And then the temperate zones are the parts between the frigid and the torrid zone. So there's the temperate zones. So that's where it's nice to live. And then the stars represent the poles. So this is the Antarctic pole. And then this is the Arctic, Polus Arcticus there. So that's the Arctic pole. And then additionally to that, I think we have the zones coming out from the Earth. So the center would be Terra, that's Earth. And then you have air, and then you have the blue, which represents the sky, and then you have fire, which is like the sun and the stars and all that up there. So this was sort of a medieval and now Renaissance sort of conception of the Earth. And it's sort of interesting that it's both of these diagrams together in one place. And it's very pretty here. I have a little bit of gold for the stars there. Actually, the whole manuscript is really nicely done. And it is believed that it may have been a presentation copy for the Doge of Venice, in which case it was designed to be sort of an attractive book without necessarily an expectation that it would be used very much. So a lot of the books in our collections, if you've been here before, we often see a lot of things like marginal notes and very messy. Although this, I have to say, like, this is pretty grubby around the edges. So maybe it was read a lot, but you wouldn't necessarily expect that. All right. So again, we're going back and forth between paper and parchment here. The hand is very nice. All right, so in this section, now we're still in this section where we're describing the whole Earth. This section is about all of the different seas. So we have the the ocean. So the Germanic Ocean, the British Ocean, ones I don't recognize, but that's what these are. And the way that I've seen this described a couple of times is as a written, what's the word? Chart. Amy, what's the name of the maps? It starts with a P.
Portolan?
Portolan, yes, the Portolan maps, which we have a few, or at least one in our collection. And they're sort of very, very detailed maps showing particularly the shapes of both the water and the pieces of land. And this is quite detailed. And so it is supposed to be helpful for navigation. So even though there's not a map, you might be able to read this and navigate according to how the both the water and the land is described in this. At least that's the intent. And the author himself, Benedetto Catrugli, was a had a lot of experience at sea. So he was, if the identification of this text is correct, he really did know what he was talking about here. And so here's the end, Descriptio Totius Orbis. And it ends, interestingly, with lists of places divided by continent. So here we have Europe here, and then a little bit further down we have Africa here, and then we have Asia all the way at the bottom. And it's interesting that he divides them up like this, again thinking about maps, because particularly medieval mappamundi, that is maps of the world, were divided into three. There's a very common thing called a T map, where the water is sort of expressed as it looks like a letter T, and then you have Europe on top and Africa and Asia divided in the bottom. And that is a way to divide the earth. And so he's also doing this in his written thing. One of the interesting things in this, the article, it's by Chet Van Duzer, is that he posits that that this is not the original manuscript, and that the original one actually had a mappamundi in it, and that would go along with this, which there's not enough room here for that, I don't think so. So there's not one here, but that's sort of an interesting idea. The other copy also doesn't have a map there. All right, so the next section is types of ships and roles of officers. And so I actually, for this section, we skipped, we skipped an illustration. There's another one. I don't know how we missed it. Where did we go? Come on. Here we go. I didn't want to miss this because this is really nice. So this is another diagram of the Earth. And I like this because it's sort of making an attempt of looking like Earth. So I think there's Italy in the middle. I think that little thing sticking out is Italy. And then we have Africa down here. And then Europe would be up here, England off to the side. And then that might be Greece. It's really big. But anyway, sort of Asia this way. And you can sort of see, I was talking about that T. This is not a T map, really, but you can see how the continents are divided up there. So that's sort of interesting. And then, as with the other one, we have the, I guess it would be the spheres around the Earth. So we have Terra in the middle, and then we have, maybe that's not air, maybe that's water around. And then we have the blue of the sky, and then we have the red. But then on the outside, this is representing the stars. So we have the zodiac. These are the signs of the zodiac, which of course are constellations in the sky. So we have Scorpio and I don't know, Pisces is over here. And all of them. So that's sort of neat. So I'm glad we didn't miss that. Sorry about that. Oop. Here we go. So back to here. Where are we? Oh, so I really like this script. It's like it's pointy, and I like that. Let me see, going back to book 1. Let's see, book 2 deals with ship designs and the roles of officers in that. And this one here is where we're going to find our one diagram of, oh, here, that's still him. Oh, right, here we go. So here's our section on types of ships and officers. And there are little headings that, and the initials, which as usual will sort of help guide us where we are. So here is the, down here at the bottom. So this is a diagram showing where the different rowers sit. And I'm not sure exactly how to read this, but I'm assuming there's like bigger, maybe there's a, there's one part of the ship where you have fewer, maybe stronger rowers and then other ones. So that is apparently what that diagram is. A good practical thing to know when you are planning to take your ship out. Let's see. And then the next section, I'll just page through this so we can have a look. Right, ship designs, 13 chapters. And I'm noticing here that this is also has this sort of alternating parchment and paper. Which is sort of, so here's parchment, that's parchment in the middle. There's also been some conservation work done here in the middle. All right, so here's the start of the next section. This is the section on meteorology and astronomy as they relate to navigation. Very important. You would want to, a major part of navigation would be being able to find your way by the stars. And it looks like there might have been some maybe water damage here. Maybe that's what happened there, because the ink here has been a little bit runny and it's a little worn off, and you can see where the conservation work has covered up some of the ink. And it's only in sort of the central part of the manuscript where I'm seeing this, so I don't know how that would happen without damaging the rest of it, but it's still a nice initial there. And there's sort of more, maybe it was taken apart when that happened. I'm totally guessing. Here's another diagram. This is a compass, 12 directions of the compass. Another thing that would be important to know if you're going to be doing any kind of navigation would be knowing how to read a compass. So that's what we have going on there. So, and then the last section is actually, before we reach the last section, here we have again, here's the parchment in the middle of choir. It's a little messy. We have some charts. So here, and I'm not quite sure how to read these, but there's a chart here. This one on this page is notable because for dating the text or the manuscript, we see 1465. So this is why we've been dating the manuscript 1464, 1465, because it has those dates there. And here we go. So that helps us figure that out. All right, and then one more chart here. I think that navigation by sea you would have a lot of charts. There would be a lot of charts and a lot of math probably. I don't think I'd make a very good sea captain for these reasons, but I like looking at the books. All right, and here's the start of the last choir, or sorry, not the last choir, the last chapter. Another beautiful initial, and the last chapter or book, pardon me, book 4 is dedicated to cartography. So it's all about maps and discusses maps in general and describes the shores of the Mediterranean from Gibraltar to Venice and to Egypt. So another sort of verbal map instead of a drawn map. And this section doesn't have any, oddly enough, for a section about maps, doesn't have any drawings at all, which is sort of interesting. And that is LJS 473, and we're just about out of time, but are there any questions or thoughts? It's a pretty simple one today, but I hope you enjoyed it. Just having a look. All right, then I will close the meeting, and thank you everybody for coming, and hope to see you again next week.